Welcome back to Morning Express. We're glad you're watching on this 15th day of January. Yes, it is still January, mid-month. Have about 2 weeks to go to February, so hold on there if the times are getting tough. But to our third discussion this morning, and we're all about relationships, but a very important part of them that sometimes really causes a lot of agony for many people. And as you see, Chris Hart, relationship expert, is with me in studio. Today we're all about recovering from infidelity. How do you overcome that? On the onset, when you ask somebody, what if he cheats or she cheats on you, what will you do? They will say, I'm going to leave. I'm not going to stay there. But as Chris will be explaining to us, in most cases, that does not happen. People stay on. Is it true, Chris? They stay on.
Yeah. I mean, the statistics are very plain, you know. First of all, just about every marriage is affected by infidelity at some point.
Really?
Some don't find out about it, of course, but both are unfaithful. But the vast majority, there is infidelity, and most relationships do continue.
So it's very common.
It's extremely common.
Wow.
Yes.
And when talking about infidelity, are we talking about the normal one that most people, when you say infidelity, what rings fast in their mind is, you know, cheating, sexual?
Yes. I mean, okay, it's how shall I put it? There's a spectrum of it, you know. Everybody has to define their own boundary as to where infidelity starts and where harmless behavior ends, you know. I mean, what happens if, you know, if I find my wife talking with somebody in a coffee shop at lunchtime, I'm probably going to say that's okay.
Yeah.
6 o'clock, I'm beginning to get a bit iffy. 9 o'clock with a candle, no, definitely not okay. You know? So, you know, everybody's boundaries are different. But, yeah, there's a lot of it.
There's a lot of it. When you say common, that it happens with most marriages, most couples, do majority know and you know, choosing to turn a blind eye, or some they don't know?
Some are completely unaware, but the majority of people are pretty sharp. And most people sense there's something going on because they can see a change in their partner. They don't know, I mean, everybody thinks it's the SMSs and the emails. It's not usually. It's little changes of behavior.
Really?
Different pattern to the way they're spending their day and the way they're accessible or not accessible and things like that.
Yeah, but there are times you call and they cannot talk to you.
And they don't talk to you, or they're just not available, or they're just taking that bit longer to get home in the evenings, or they're buying their petrol at a different petrol station.
Okay, so for women or men who are fussy about having a look at your phone and the messages, that won't quite work nowadays.
To be truthful, I think that's a very unhelpful thing to do. I think what couples should do is give each other their passwords and then not look. That way I know I can be snooped on, but I expect my wife to keep her nose out of it.
Okay.
You know, that's the right thing to do.
That's the right thing, but most people will not do that, Chris. They will look.
I know, but you know, then you have a row about snooping.
Okay.
And that causes a lot of trouble in its own.
Remember, you can get and be involved and be part of our discussion this morning, recovering from infidelity. Have you ever been cheated on? How did it pan out for you? Let us know. Our phone numbers will be scrolling on the bottom of your screen. Call in and we'll hear from you and talk to Chris about what you have to say. Let's break it down further, Chris, in terms of men and women. African traditional setting, men are mostly accused or are on the spotlight for cheating. They're expected to be the ones who are the ones lying and doing all manner of things. Is that correct?
Strictly speaking, no. It's pretty much an equal opportunities activity. If you ask people in the street, then the men are likely to admit it, and the women will never admit it.
Never.
Never. But if a psychologist asks them in a nice setting and feeling of security and all the rest of it, people own up, and then suddenly the numbers become 50-50. So it's an equal opportunity.
It's an equal. So men are not cheating more than...
No, they do. They cheat in a different way. And it's got to be borne in mind that there's a whole group of men who are total rogues. There is a group of men who are total rogues. You don't want to marry them. Don't get involved, you know. If you think you're dating one of these men, don't go near him, because he has a lifestyle of having as many partners as possible. And even if he does walk up the aisle with you, he'll still carry on. But if you talk about normal people, then those people are very equal.
Okay, so what are those different ways in which we'll see the patterns for the men, for the women? Because then the dynamics will shift, will change. You said the women will cheat differently.
Yeah. You know, it's really about the way people live their lives. Men, they achieve their maximum desire, if I can use that word, around about age 18, and then it slowly declines for the rest of their lives. So men cheat, if you like, all their lives, pretty much equal proportion every year. Women, on the other hand, have a very definite pattern. They're most likely to cheat in their 30s, and particularly their late 30s, almost 40. That's because that's when their desire peaks. And so a lady who is sort of, 37, 38, 39, she starts doing things that will put her at risk. She doesn't realize she's doing it, but she is quite likely to have a one-night stand of some sort.
Okay.
And that's when it mostly happens with women.
With women. But how will it play out? Because at the end of the day, you always have people trying to get this married person, because you always imagine that is a good person, that they're already taken by somebody else. It's a good person. So the rings nowadays don't work as deterrents.
No, they
actually hold encourage. But when this person decides to engage, and already they're in a married relationship, they're married, or in a very steady relationship, why does that happen?
Well, first of all, what you just said is very true. People in general find married people very attractive, more attractive than single people. They're a tiny bit suspicious of single people,
because they're single.
Because they're single. Yeah. Why hasn't this person got married? But married people are more sophisticated, they're more experienced, they've got more money, and all the rest. They're very attractive. And then, of course, what tends to happen is a lot depends on your lifestyle. People meet and work together, and when you work together, you start talking about things. And before you know it, things are beginning to slip over a boundary. You're beginning to discuss things you shouldn't discuss. Maybe you're in a profession where there are peaks and troughs. There's a sudden huge stress, and then, wow, the project's over. A lot of affairs start that night. Things like that. Another thing that's very interesting is that men, of course, notoriously will take a total stranger home. Women won't. Women do not have affairs with total strangers. They have affairs with people they know.
Okay.
And somebody quite close to home, in fact. So, again, different pattern.
So for the women, it will be somebody who's been around.
It'll be a colleague at work. It'll be somebody they socialize with.
And you'd say some of these careers, like mine.
Yes, absolutely. Yours is one of the most risky. Sorry about that. All the stressful careers like law, media, newspapers, where people really have sudden deadlines, and then all of a sudden, wow, I can relax, go for a drink.
They're likely to. Why is that? Because even you find with the media, many people, I've had this over and over again, men will not trust, they call them the TV girls. It's true, they will say all manner of things. And then you've mentioned the lawyers, but most of this you talk about, the intensity in which the work comes. But is that the only case?
No, it affects men and women equally, but there are some professions where the men are notorious, like, for example, the army. Go out with an army guy, you're going to have an exciting life. And that's all about his style of life, the things he thinks are important, the high testosterone level. The other type of profession is the one where there's a lot of adrenaline. Where instead of being a nice, quiet job where you spend all day working on a spreadsheet, it's the job where you suddenly, tremendous stress, tremendous activity, and then all of a sudden you achieve something and everybody relaxes and feels good.
Right.
You're very vulnerable if you live in one of those professions.
Because in relaxing, then you want relaxing with somebody.
There's a real fact that people who experience a lot of fear and adrenaline and anxiety fall in love very easily. So, two people doing something very stressful, things start between them.
Okay, and also the ones who make a lot of money sometimes?
Funnily enough, money is not that important in affairs. It obviously is a factor, but it's more a factor in another aspect of this whole thing. There's an awful lot of women on this planet who are never going to find a husband, so they end up as girlfriends and mistresses. Now, strictly speaking, they're not having affairs. He is, but she isn't. Now, that's what is driven by money. But the typical affair is not driven by money, it's driven by connection. The fact that you suddenly find you can talk to somebody and
Right.
and you suddenly get close.
Okay, let's get to the meat of this conversation. We'll continue to talk about, these different elements of cheating and all. But when we're talking about recovering, so this couple is in this relationship, they're married, they've been married 5 years, 10 years. We'll talk about, because I think it will be different for the different periods and length of time they've been together. But you find out that Chris has been cheating all this time, or this one time. Let's talk about first those who find them in the act.
Well, actually, that's not very common.
It is not?
No, it's very rare for people to actually find somebody naked between the sheets. I mean, it makes the newspapers when it happens,
yes.
But it's very rare. What normally happens is you begin to slowly get suspicious. You begin to feel that there's something not quite right. And you start, you're almost listening at great keyholes from that moment on. And the big problem with that is that you gradually get to a point where you burst out and you start talking about it. Now, of course, what happens? Denial. You haven't actually got any evidence, so denial is pretty much normal in that situation. Of course, it complicates things tremendously, because, if you accuse me of doing something and I don't think you've got any evidence, of course I'm going to deny it. I'm going to hope you'll lose interest in the whole thing. Get past it. But the chances are that won't happen, and eventually you will start to get evidence, and I'm going to have to backtrack. Now, of course, we're in a bit of a difficult place, because I've been lying as well as whatever else I've been doing.
Right. So denial, first thing.
Denial is pretty much the standard response. And so my advice to someone, if somebody comes to me and says, I think my husband's cheating or my wife's cheating, I always say, don't say a word. Just watch. Just wait. Wait until you have that one piece of incontrovertible evidence, so that instead of having a big row, big denials, you can one evening quietly say, now listen, look at this. Then there won't be any denials. Okay.
And most of the times you said to ensure you have that evidence that's solid before you approach and confront this partner. Mostly we don't wait for that, because it's burning.
Yes.
Inside you just want to get...
But that's a bad strategy.
Yeah.
If I really do understand why people do it.
Yes.
But it's a bad strategy. The right strategy is to just keep quiet. Now, there's two reasons for that. A lot of affairs burn out very fast. And so if you keep quiet and you go on being a thoroughly lovely spouse, there's a very good chance the other person will say, I can't do this, and they drop out of it. And so you end up thinking, okay, I think something went on, but we're going to move on. And so really you don't have a row about it. But you have a heads up which says something's wrong in this relationship. I better deal with this.
Okay. You have Njoroge online, I understand, Chris, before we continue. Njoroge, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah.
Good. I'm great. Good to hear from you. You have a question or a comment?
Yes.
Go ahead, Njoroge.
Now I have a question. I'd like to person. Previously, my wife used to have phone with me. He would even ask me to put credit on it, even sales numbers on her phone. Of this, I've noticed, senior for her, and I used to get given a journey like one food, like one food, now it is the drinker takes so much, and it is going to happen. I put on a year and if you want to give it, but from the time I did work, I had to do it. So I'm worried, I'm trying to take.
So Njoroge, you're saying kabla apate kazi simu yake ilikuwa available. Njoroge?
Yes.
Unasema kabla apate kazi simu yake ilikuwa hapo available, you could ungeza kuipata, but now she does not let you get a hold of her phone? Okay. We'll put that to Chris. Thank you for calling, Njoroge. Right. So unemployed before, or well, she wasn't working, and he could easily, the phone was there, and now she doesn't want him to have it or see it.
You know, a lot of people who are in work do feel like that. For for perfectly good professional reasons. Imagine somebody who's a healthcare provider, for example, doesn't want you looking at their laptop, their iPad, whatever, because they're keeping medical things on it. There's a real reluctance to let a spouse actually trawl through your stuff. So it could have a perfectly innocent reason. But of course, I understand.
Not on the phone.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
not keeping medical records.
Well,
on
you'd
your
be
phone.
surprised what people keep on smartphones. But anyway, I know exactly where he's coming from.
Yeah.
And of course, the right thing to do is to watch the rest of her life. Going snooping through her phone and making snide remarks about the phones and all that sort of thing is just going to cause friction between them. But what he wants to do is to watch her like a hawk and try and figure out what else is going on. And he'll gradually piece it all together. And when he's got the piece of incontrovertible evidence, then he can have a conversation with her.
So that evidence will not be a certain message from a certain one, because you see, when you talk about the evidence, what happens sometimes is, for example, on my phone, there's this guy who likes me,
Yes.
and I cannot stop what he writes to me.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that message is on there. So if you read it, you'll think, oh, okay, so there's something going
The
on
truth
here.
is, most messages on phones are ambiguous.
Yeah.
You know, you can read them both ways. So you can tell me that this message you've seen says, yes, you're having an affair. And I say, no, we're just friends. Now, we can't resolve that argument. It's very unusual for somebody having an affair to say, meet you at such and such a hotel, room such and such at 3 o'clock this afternoon. They won't write messages like that. You see what I mean? So you end up in this stuck position where you end up disputing what's going on. And of course, if you've been snooping in my phone, what do? Yeah, you've been going at my phone.
Yeah.
So we change the argument away from my behavior to yours. Very difficult. So the answer is, don't do it.
So phone snooping should not even be happening.
I don't think so. I mean, I know it will. But the right thing to do is, if you do notice a message, don't own up to the fact that you've been looking. Just keep watching until you see something that's incontrovertible.
Okay. And then other than the messages, there's the calls that come in certain times, and, they'll walk away and be like,
Yes, yeah. But then you see, that's etiquette. If I'm in a restaurant and my phone rings and I must take it, I will get up and walk away. I won't annoy the other diners, will I?
But some men or women will
I know
always
exactly.
talk, and then once in a while, this number.
But we'll always have an excuse. Oh, it was my boss, and it was very
Yeah.
sensitive,
And it's interesting that now what people will do is either delete messages
yeah.
or will save the other person's number in a very funny, interesting way.
Yes.
Like one of our comedians was talking about saving the Mpango, they call it Mpango Akando's number, as, this motorbike people, they call them Dudi, so you send Dudi one. And so, anyway, they'll come up with all manner of ways. But you talked about when recovering from it. The first thing to do, what one will do is deny.
Yes, and the first and most difficult stage is actually getting past the denial. So that's why it's so important not to raise the subject until you know you're going to be able to say, hey, you've been busted. So now let's not have any denials, let's talk about what's happened. Because if you get into the denial phase, that can go on for weeks and weeks and get very poisonous, and you're no further forward. So make sure you've got real evidence. Don't, for example, react on hearsay. If somebody says, oh, I saw so-and-so doing this, don't react, because...
And don't even ask?
Don't even ask, just watch. I mean, it's a very important thing that couples must do, is to watch each other. I know that sounds a bit unromantic, but if my wife knows that I am always aware of what she's doing and I'm watching her and we're close and all the rest of it, it's going to dissuade her from having an affair enormously, because she knows she'll get picked up in those little things that change. Same the other way around.
Yeah.
So couples should monitor one another, and that will help dissuade affairs enormously. But when you have got some real evidence, then of course you must face up to it.
Okay. And what would, for example, Chris, be real evidence? Because most times what happens with these cases will be the messages here and there, the calls, or somebody said they saw him or her with some other man somewhere, or dancing, very intimately.
It's going to have to be something like a hotel room. You've got evidence of somebody staying in a hotel. It's going to be something like a photograph. You know how the photographers take photographs? Anything like that that's really pretty incontrovertible. At a time when, for example, you've got a photograph which clearly says Mombasa, and he said he was in Kisumu. That's going to be hard to explain.
Right. Lipstick on his shirt?
Not so easy, but the real clear one is where he's told you one story and actually you've caught him living another. So he said he was in Kisumu, but actually you've got real evidence. Stubs from the plane, receipt from the hotel, he was in Mombasa.
Okay, so after denial, then what do we see happening? Because ultimately then when they come with a hard proof, then you have to accept, own up. There are those who continue to crazy maintain, it wasn't me.
The best thing to do, if you are the innocent party, is to say, hey, I've got this, this and this, and I think you've got a bit of explaining to do. And then you say, pretty swiftly, now listen, this is not the end of the relationship. You and I are going to talk about this, but I'm not walking out, I'm not throwing you out, I want us to talk about this. The biggest reason why people deny is because they think they're going to cause a row. It's going to be a big, big fight.
Okay. All right, let's take Boaz from Mukunda first before we continue on that. Boaz, good morning.
Morning, bro.
Thank you for calling. Share with us your question or comment, please.
Okay, I'm going from Mukunda. I am going to city. And these are things that have been taking part way that. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
There are things that have been taking to the past way that. But all the time, if I ask for the question, the answer went. So, with myself and sort of I'm okay, I was telling
So every time you ask what did you say? Every time you ask her?
Okay, if I ask her for money.
To get married?
Wait, she said that at the time was only in car. So I was asking what? Yes, I let you what week later that involving interview what made it possible.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Boaz. Thank you very much for calling us from Mukunda. We appreciate. And I know some of the things, what I've picked from that is she's proposing to this lady and she keeps postponing, saying not ready to the next year and wondering what the deal is.
Yes.
And ultimately, finally asking what makes people get into infidelity. Yeah.
Okay, well, in her case, an awful lot depends on her education and age. If she thinks she's in a career that she wants to put off having a family for a few years, what he's experiencing could be just that she wants to be a little older before she starts her family.
Yes.
But there are also, of course, some dark possibilities, like she could be running 2 or 3 boyfriends. And the one thing she doesn't want to be is married, because then suddenly she's supposed to spend all her time in one house. So he needs to just look around carefully and try and figure out what's really going on in her life.
And try to understand why is it she's so strongly feeling against getting married, especially if you want to get married. It's unfortunate. On the reasons, I think we've already touched on that, why people will cheat.
Yes, I mean, it's worth saying that an awful lot of affairs start by accident. They weren't intended. 2 people just find themselves having a drink after work and they suddenly look at one another and they realize something's happened. And they get carried away. Lots of people believe very strongly that they will never cheat. They've got strong values, they know exactly what they're going to do, and then suddenly they realize, oh gosh, I'm in it. And they realize they haven't got any defenses. In the case of men, of course, it's the drive is have as many partners as possible. In the case of women, it tends to be this peak in the late 30s. And you can imagine what the subconscious is saying. Time for one more baby. Good idea not to have all my eggs in one basket. So maybe I need to have a child, but my husband doesn't really know where they
And you also think unmet needs could, because you don't have a partner who's 100%, so maybe 80, and then this one person gives a 20%, which
the classic thing that happens is that the main relationship, is not very happy. You're with somebody who you can't talk to. There are lots of things you don't talk about. You spend your lives just in a routine. And then, of course, one day you're particularly frustrated about something and you're talking to the person in the desk next to you. and you suddenly realise they're interested, they want to help, and they talk. All of a sudden, you start on a slippery slope.
Yeah. So quite a number of things. It's all about keeping the balance and checks in the relationship going.
You know, if you want to have a relationship in which your partner doesn't stray, then you should be very nice to them. And I know an awful lot of relationships where people are not actually very nice to one another, and then they're a bit astonished when they stray.
Yeah.
So the trick is, be very nice to your partner.
Yeah. Don't give them a reason.
Don't give them a reason. Yeah.
Okay.
Talk to them lots. When they tell you things, don't tear them apart. People can be amazingly critical, even contemptuous, you know, and if that happens every time I open up to my wife, sooner or later our relationship's going to get flaky.
Yeah, and I'll find another lady who's easier to talk to.
I won't do it deliberately, but one day
It will happen.
I will be sitting next to somebody and I'm pouring my heart out and she's lapping it up. Now I'm in real deep trouble.
Oh my. Okay, interesting. But something you said before we took that call, you're talking about when you're having that conversation about did you cheat, did you not, and you say that this person who's coming to the accuser, if I may put it that way, should indicate that this does not mean the end of the relationship, we're still okay. But you know, when you find out somebody's cheating on you, Chris, it is hard to start telling the person, you know, we are going to continue surviving after this. You're thinking, get out of the house, leave.
Actually, you'd be surprised. This has obviously never happened to you. When you ask people ahead of time, they always say, I'll throw him out. But do you know what is the most common thing for a woman to do when she discovers her husband's cheating? They go to bed. They do. Same way, the other way around too. People, on the instant they realise something's happening, they focus on the fact that they're likely to lose this person and they don't want it to happen. So people need to take advantage of that emotion. It's very easy to get carried away and get angry and cause a big row, but it's actually far better to wait until you can talk about it in a rational way. So don't start the conversation the split second you hear about it.
Okay.
Wait 24 hours.
Calm
Think.
down.
Set the scene so that you're going to be able to talk undisturbed for an hour or two. And then don't say, I think you're having an affair. Say, I got hold of this. Now please tell me what's going on. And then you do it in a way which says, I'm not going to throw you out, there's not going to be a row, we're not going to break the crockery, let's talk. Now if you do that, there's a very good chance you will start discussing what happened. And of course the first step in getting past it is to know what happened. You want the guilty party to tell you everything, when, where, how, why.
Okay.
Yes, you'd be surprised. The innocent party develops a huge need to know all the details. In fact, they often drive the guilty party nuts because they keep asking again and again and again. But it's a necessary stage in getting over things. You've got to get past the point where I think I know everything that happened.
Okay. Wait, there's somebody asking about one of the callers we've gotten, one of the messages, I beg your pardon. They've been married, church wedding, they got married, church wedding, and the wife is cheating. And you know, for many people in such situations, everybody was happy coming to your wedding, it's all the celebrated thing. And when a man is cheating, society, unfortunately, it's easier to take. But when it's a woman, first as the man, you do not want to admit that my wife is cheating.
Yes.
So what do you tell this person?
Well, first of all, it's worth asking why we have that curious double standard.
Yeah.
What you just said is literally true. We are much more relaxed about a man who's cheated than a woman. And what's really noticeable is that it's the women who police that. You'd think that the men would be totally relaxed about a loose woman. Well, they are. That's the plain fact.
Yeah.
And it's the women who, if you like, supervise the double standard. And so you're quite right. If a woman is straying, there will be a lot of stigma, there will be a lot of talk. And it's very difficult to then deal with that situation. And the best thing, of course, is to remember that you are a team, you are a couple, and you're going to solve this problem inside the marriage. So you don't tell a soul about it, you just sit down together and say, come on, we're going to sort this out. And of course, it might be, it's not common, but it might be that the real reason for all of this is so serious the relationship is going to end. And if that's the case, just quietly go through that process. But 9 times out of 10, it doesn't end. There is a reason which can be fixed. Like, for example, something's gone wrong in the relationship, people have got lonely, people find they can't talk. If you put those things right, then actually the relationship will be better than it was before.
Yeah. In talking about recovering from infidelity, the challenge then becomes after that, even when they're able to move past that particular incident, then the person, the innocent party, will later on always wonder, always imagine, always...
Well, strangely enough, that's a better place to be than the naivety of the 22-year-olds who just got wed and who think nothing will ever go wrong. They, of course, end up not treating each other right because they think they can get away with it. They can't imagine a marriage coming to an end. But now imagine that you're 10 years older and you've seen that it's possible for marriages to get into trouble. Now you realize that it's really important that you treat your spouse right. Now, of course, you're a much stronger marriage.
Okay. So the ideas of you'll now not trust this person, don't go out, who are you talking to when they're on phone, who are you texting? Because some people become paranoid.
Well, they do. Now, if that happens, it's usually a problem with the innocent party. Some people are very anxious, very paranoid, very insecure.
Yeah.
And trying to reassure those people can be a real uphill struggle sometimes.
But they need to be reassured.
You have to reassure them, with a shovel. It really has to be laid on heavy. But you've really got to get to the point where those sort of thoughts stop going through your mind. When you're so connected during your entire day, your entire life, that you know always where you are and what you're doing and all the rest of it, it never crosses your mind that they're up to mischief.
Okay. Finally, Chris, you maintain that it is possible to recover from infidelity. So for those watching and sense their partners are cheating or going astray, what is it you tell them? And for some, they've already been through the first conversation. He was caught or she was caught and they talked about it, promised not to do it. Some are still doing it. There's still suspicion that it's happening. Can we keep overcoming that?
It's worth splitting people into two groups. Whereas the guy, it's usually a guy, who does it all the time. It's become a lifestyle.
Yes.
A woman might well choose to say, I'm not going to forgive this guy again. This is too much. It's the third time and it keeps promising. But where you're talking about someone where it's not become a lifestyle and you really think it's worth pursuing the marriage, then what you've got to do is two things. You've got to be completely open and talk about it. You've got to work on what's happening in your marriage that's causing this to be more probable, the unhappiness in the marriage. And if you do that, then the chances are that it will never happen again.
Okay. Thank you for joining us this morning. We'll see you next week. And we hope those words will help some couple that may be struggling or going through such a situation.